Once you've decided that you should involve stakeholders or interested parties, you need to decide at what point in the process you want to work with them. This can depend upon many conditions, including the level of participation of the interested parties, which is addressed in detail in the What video of this series. If the goal is more of a top-down approach or to inform or consult with different groups, you may want to set up your engagement after your project is completed or at least partially completed, in order to provide information on what you did and maybe receive some feedback. In this timeline, you don't get the back and forth of early stage planning, problem identification, and goal setting, but you can present to multiple different groups of interested people and receive feedback or ideas from additional groups of people that might use your forecast or model. Another benefit to this timeline is that you can develop a proof of concept before going to find your end users, making sure you have something of value to people before putting it in their hands. On the other end of the collaboration spectrum, you may involve your interested parties from the start of the project. This is especially important if you have identified marginalized groups of people that may be impacted by your work. In addition, if you're aiming to involve or collaborate with interested parties or even consult to some extent, you need to bring in people from the conception of the project or idea. When using this timeline, you are giving people a voice from the beginning of the project and using their input to better inform the project and identify their needs. You are also thinking about the long-term impacts of the research and how to mitigate changes of the project and results over time. The when component in this timeline is really all the time. You will never not work with your interested parties during the course of the project. Here is an example of how some researchers think about the timing of co-production.
People that we typically work with, I would say, who are in the knowledge industry already, co-delivery will work because some people don't mind that you're only there on the last day showing them your report and helping them. They also don't mind if they're involved in co-development leading to co-delivery, but they're ignored in the design process. That's not true, we're learning, with Indigenous custodians of land and sea in Australia. They actually want to be part of the discussion, even before perhaps what I thought of as the design process. At the ideation stage. Now that's very difficult, but that's what perhaps true co-production will look like to those communities, is you actually were here before you wrote the proposal to get the money to start the co-design, to do the co-development, to do the delivery. And that's really challenging, thinking about how we would work with participatory research that way.
The benefits of engaging with people starting at the beginning of the project are that you will know exactly what the organization or forecast user is needing, and then you can tailor your model to that goal. This can help in time management, idea generation, and helping address all tasks. Engagement at this stage may also be driven by the partnering organization and if you're receiving some funding from them. Their engagement may be part of your agreement, which is another piece of the timeline to consider. In addition, letting marginalized organizations take the lead and set the project needs empowers the organization to participate in the projects that are most valuable to them, which in turn leads to greater participation and incentive to build relationships and work on the project and future projects with you. Here's an example of how engaging with end users from the beginning can make a more effective forecasting tool.
So before we did any modeling at all, we had a stakeholder consultation, and how we did this was we did this kind of thing. We initially thought of, we'll do like a group interview, but there was a suggestion to do a kind of these 30-minute interviews, and it certainly found like it was actually really, really useful. I've never done anything like this as part of my own research, so it's just useful to be able to do kind of video interviews, and we talk away to people. It wasn't really part of, say, like an academic paper or anything like that. It was more like we kept it anonymized, and the only goal was we wanted to have was a list of the species that people felt would be should be on the application, rather than just developing it and then all of a sudden people come up to you afterwards and going, why couldn't you add this in? Can you add that in? And also, like, if there's any applications that they had come across previously, and if they would like features that they had features that were there, or if they had any bits that they think that would be really useful to have in the application itself.
The Department of Interior discussed concepts of adaptive management in a technical guide written in 2007 and updated in 2009. The focus was to guide how to constantly evaluate and adapt your project based on the impact of natural events, while considering the impact on wildlife, people, and the environment. Adaptive management ultimately gives you high levels of control over outcomes, even when the uncertainty is high, and involves many voices throughout the process of assessing the problem, designing solutions, implementing changes, monitoring effects, evaluation, adjustments, and then back to assessing the problem. Here, stakeholders are involved in step 1, where transparency and adaptability are emphasized. Objectives are then identified, including how to measure the impacts over time. Management actions are then established, and models are drawn up to detail how these ideas could be implemented over time. Monitoring plans are put into place, followed by assessment of the decided upon actions. Here, the process turns iterative, with new management actions implemented, monitored, and then assessed again and again. You can see how stakeholders are involved at the start, middle, and end, although this process is often continual. And we will see how impactful and important their contributions and commitments are to the goals of these projects.
I'd probably say that all the work we do is engaged in some way, shape, or form. I think we use a range of different terms that have related meanings but describe slightly differently the level to which we engage in a participatory way. So we do talk a lot about knowledge co-production, and the paper that we shared around Co-3D kind of talks about how that looks in terms of the stage of the research. Is it at the kind of problem framing end? Is it in bringing together different types of knowledge, or is it in working closely with partners and stakeholders in the kind of delivery phase of a piece of work? And then we also talk a lot about transdisciplinary research, which is very related, but is about the methodologies of bringing together different knowledge types to work towards common problems.
So, whether you involve your interested parties first or last, or continuously involve them, you can see how the when of everything matters. Often we hear that involving stakeholders early will help your project most over time. While this is often the case, sometimes we don't know who our stakeholders are until we've developed the proof of concept that we can disseminate to someone who will use the tools. Careful consideration of your stakeholders throughout the project is important, and once a potential interested party or impacted party has been identified, then is the time to inform, consult, involve, collaborate, or defer to. Again, keep in mind your impact, especially if there are marginalized groups involved. You don't want to do harm with your work. Working with impacted groups from the start can help to avoid issues and find alternatives to achieve project goals.